Hello and welcome, and firstly thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Now I know how busy life is between school, work, school runs, after school clubs, homework, dinner, just trying to squeeze in 5 minutes for yourself, finding 40 minutes to sit down and think about your child's future isn't always easy, so I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Now before we begin, I want to make you a promise. This isn't going to be one of those presentations where I spend ages trying to sell you something. In fact, whether your child joins one of our programs or not, my goal is exactly the same. I want you to leave today feeling informed, confident, and really super clear about the Birmingham 11 Plus journey. Because if you're anything like most of the parents I speak to, you've probably already spent hours online searching. You've joined possible Facebook groups, watched YouTube videos, and possibly even asked other parents at the school gates. And you've probably even already bought a few revision books. If I'm totally honest, you've probably come away feeling even more confused than when you first started. One person tells you to start in year 3, another person tells you to start in year 5, and that's absolutely fine. Someone recommends one tutor, someone tells you tutoring isn't necessary. One website says one thing and another says something completely different. I get it, I'm a parent of 3. It can be very, very, very overwhelming. And that's exactly why I started and created this presentation for you. Not to add more information, but to simply give you clarity. Because once as a parent you understand the journey, everything starts making more sense. So by the end of today, you'll understand how the Birmingham 11 Plus works, the biggest mistakes I see parents make every single year, what your child actually needs to succeed, and how to decide whether grammar school is actually the right path for your family. So if you've got a notepad or notebook nearby, I would encourage you to grab it. There are a few things today that you'll definitely want to write down. So let's get started. Now, before we go any further, I'd like you to think about one question. Why are you here? Maybe your child's teachers mentioned grammar school. Maybe your son or daughter has always loved learning and is enthusiastic and you don't want them to miss an opportunity. Maybe friends keep talking about the 11 Plus and you feel like everyone else understands it except for you. Or maybe you're simply a parent who wants to make sure the doors stay open for your child. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know something. You're already doing one of the most important things. You're being proactive. You're choosing to learn now rather than wishing you'd learned later. And that really, really matters. One sentence has always stayed with me throughout my years and years of teaching. Parents rarely regret starting too early. But I've met countless parents who wish they'd started sooner. Now, I don't tell you that to make you panic. In fact, I want to do the exact opposite. I want to remove the panic because today's presentation isn't about putting pressure on you. It's about replacing uncertainty with a concrete plan. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, because you're probably wondering, who are you? So for all of you that don't know me, my name is Cordelia Cooper and I'm the founder of Splat Tuition. Now, over the years, I've worked with hundreds of wonderful children and families, helping children strengthen their learning, build confidence through competence, and really prepare for some of the biggest academic milestones in their education. And one of those milestones, as you probably know, is of course the Birmingham 11 Plus. Now, something interesting started happening over the years. Parents weren't just asking me to support and teach their children, they were asking me questions like, when should I start? What score do they actually need? Should we buy, what type of revision books should we buy and where should we get them from? Is my child even clever enough? What is verbal reasoning? All of these questions. And after having the same conversations over and over again, I realised something. Parents, they weren't lacking commitment, they were lacking clarity. Now, nobody had ever simply sat them down and explained the entire journey from beginning right through to the end. And that's why this presentation exists. Because, I don't believe that parents should have to piece together one of the biggest decisions in their child's education from random Facebook comments. You as a parent, we all deserve so much better than that. We deserve the clarity. So imagine this, if you don't mind. Can I ask you to imagine for one moment, imagine it's next March and your child's just opened an email, or you've opened an email and you're staring at the screen, and then suddenly you smile or your child smiles and they've been offered a place at one of Birmingham's grammar schools. You know, you hug each other, you're excited, they're excited, you guys did it. All of those evenings of practice, all of those little moments of encouragement, because they do make a massive difference over time, and suddenly it all feels worthwhile. Now, imagine something else. Imagine sitting there wondering, I wish you had known this earlier. So many parents say exactly the same thing to me. Or imagine saying, I wish someone had explained the process, or I wish you had had a proper concrete plan right from the start. That feeling, it's not great, that feeling of regret. And that's exactly why I want to help families avoid that feeling of, oh my gosh, I didn't know, or oh my gosh, I should have done it earlier. Because while nobody can promise a grammar school place, every parent can make sure they give their child the very best opportunity. And that's exactly what today is all about. So the question is, I know you may have asked yourself, is grammar school really worth it? So let's start with one of the biggest questions that parents ask me. Is it actually really worth it? My honest answer is, it just depends on the child. You know, grammar schools aren't better schools, they are different schools. They're designed for children who enjoy an academic challenge, who learn really quickly, who are curious and happy to work at a really fast pace. Now, there are some fantastic comprehensive schools across Birmingham. Comprehensive in the means that you don't have to pay for them and they're not selective. Now, many children absolutely flourish there, and the goal should never be, my child must go to a grammar school. The goal should always be, my child deserves an environment where they will thrive. And for some children, that truly is grammar school. And for others, it isn't. And that's perfectly okay. You know, one thing I never want parents to think is that passing the 11 plus determines a child's worth, because it doesn't. It's one exam, one opportunity, and it does not define intelligence, not intelligence. It doesn't define success, you know, and it certainly doesn't define a child's outcome in life. But what it does do is open another educational pathway for children who are suited to that environment. And as I believe every family deserves the chance to decide whether that pathway is right for them. So, you know, another question, clear something up straight away, because it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I hear, that grammar schools are state schools. That means they're funded by the government. You know, parents don't pay tuition fees for their child to attend. The difference isn't cost, the difference is entry. You know, children have to qualify through the entrance assessment. Now, because grammar schools are selective, the pace of learning is often quicker and expectations are high. Children are surrounded by academically able pupils as well. So many parents tell me they value the academic culture, the opportunities available, and the outcome many grammar schools achieve. But remember, none of that means that it's the right choice for every single child. The right school is always the one where your child will be happy and challenged and supported to become the very best versions of themselves. And that's a really important distinction. So I'm going to bust one myth. Here's a myth I'd love us to get rid of. Grammar schools are only for geniuses. I've heard it before, only smart people go to grammar school. It's not true. They're simply for children who perform strongly in a specific entrance test. They aren't always the same thing. Now, I've seen incredibly bright children miss out because they didn't understand the style of question. I've also seen children exceed everyone's expectations because they had excellent preparation and knew exactly what the exam was looking for, because preparation really, truly matters. Understanding the exam really matters. Having a clear plan really matters. And that's good news, because those are the things we can actually influence. So now that we understand what grammar schools are, let's talk specifically a bit about Birmingham. Because if you're watching this from Birmingham, you have an opportunity that many families across the country simply don't have. Birmingham is home to 8 grammar schools, 8 schools that offer academically selective education without charging school fees. Now, I don't tell you that because I think every child should attend one. I tell you it because it's an opportunity, and opportunities are there to be explored. Now, one of the saddest conversations I've had with parents who say, I didn't even realise my child could have applied, or I've missed the closing date, or nobody told us until it was too late. don't ever want to hear that from any other family. I know I will. I don't want to, because whether or not your child eventually goes to a grammar school or not, I want to make that decision with all the information in front of you, not because nobody explained the process. So here's a little bit of information. Here's something that surprises most parents I meet. Most parents sort of assume their child has to sit a different entrance exam for every grammar school. Now, thankfully, that's not how Birmingham works. Your child sits one entrance test, and that one test can be used for multiple grammar school entrances. And if you choose during the registration process, you can also allow your child's result to be shared with participating grammar schools outside Birmingham, which I think is great. So just think about that for a second. One morning, one assessment, multiple opportunities depending on where you're located. And that's why getting the preparation matters so much, because it isn't just one application. It's potentially opening opportunities and several doors all at once. So I'm going to share with you 7 things every parent needs to know, and things that I didn't even know at the start of this journey as well. So if you remember nothing else from today's presentation, I hope you remember this section. I wish I had something like this at the start. Now, these are the 7 things that I wish someone had sat me down and explained, but hey, there you go. You know, it saves families so much more confusion. So let's go through them together. Now, number 1 is missing the registration deadline. It usually means missing the exam. You know, we know life gets busy, children break up from school, you're juggling work, the summer holidays begin, and you possibly tell yourself, I'll do it next week. I'm a mother, I get it, we all do it. And then before you know it, the deadline has already passed. And unfortunately, unlike many other things, there usually isn't a second opportunity. So if you miss the registration deadline, your child would genuinely have to wait until the following admission cycle. And they may be too old for that anyway. And that's why one of the first things I encourage every family to do is put important dates in your diary as soon as they are released. Do not rely on memory. Don't rely on Facebook reminders. Don't rely on any other parent mentioning it. Know your dates. Your future will thank you for it. Right, number 2. You don't choose your test centre, which a lot of parents think. It surprises everyone because they think that they can choose where they're going to sit the test. Incorrect. Parents often assume that they'll select whichever grammar school is closest. And actually what happens is your child is allocated a test centre or school to sit that test. And likewise, parents don't normally choose where their child sits. It's either a morning session or an afternoon session, which is allocated as well. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you because I don't want you to worry about things that you can't control. Instead, let's focus on the things that you can control. Preparation, routine, you can control sleep, you can control organisation, confidence, your child's confidence, and your child's mindset, which is much more important than you probably realise. Those are the things that can genuinely influence performance. So number 3, Birmingham uses multiple choice papers. Now, at the time of this presentation, we are in summer 2026. So at the time of this presentation, Birmingham's entrance assessment uses multiple choice questions, and that's important because the children's skills needs they're a little bit different. Accuracy matters, working methodically matters, understanding instructions and implementing them matters. You know, children, they need to become comfortable with selecting the correct answer efficiently under timed conditions. Now, another thing that many parents don't realise, unlike some grammar schools in England, Birmingham does not include or doesn't currently include separate creative writing papers. Now, that's one less thing for Birmingham families to prepare for. But of course, admission arrangements can change over time. So always check the official information before your child sits the assessment. And number 4, primary school doesn't prepare children specifically for the 11 plus. Now, I want to be very careful how I say this because teachers do work incredibly hard. I've worked as a teacher for many years. I understand the job, I understand the role, but schools are there to teach the national curriculum. They're not designed to prepare every child specifically for selective entrance examinations. So, for example, many children arrive having never seen verbal reasoning or non-verbal reasoning questions before. And that isn't because their school has done anything wrong. It's simply because those question types simply aren't a routine of everyday classroom teaching and classroom life. So please don't assume that because your child is doing well at school, they'll automatically feel comfortable with every aspect of the Birmingham 11 Plus, because they're two different things. Number 5. Excuse me. Doing well at school doesn't automatically mean that your child is ready. Now, I hear this all the time. They're at greater depth, they're top of the class. You know, her teacher says that she's really able, and that is wonderful. Congratulations to you and your child. But the Birmingham 11 Plus is a selective assessment. Children aren't just answering questions, they're answering questions under time pressure. They're switching between different question styles which they usually don't cover in class. They're solving unfamiliar problems, they're managing nerves. Exam techniques matter, time management matters, staying calm matters. Academic ability, it's incredibly important, but so is knowing how to perform on the day. So number 6, practice papers aren't the answer. So this is probably the biggest mistake I see. Families buy paper after paper after paper, and the children complete them, and the school stays exactly the same. Why? Because practice papers measure learning. They don't create learning. So imagine asking someone to take their driving test every weekend instead of actually teaching them how to drive. The result wouldn't change very much, right? Because children need to understand the knowledge, then practice, then apply it. Then they develop speed over time. Only then do practice papers become truly valuable. Number 7, a clear plan beats working harder. Now, I think this is my favourite point, to be honest with you, because we all work incredibly hard. You know, parents buy books, we print off the worksheets, we sit in the kitchen table after work trying to figure things out for our children. We encourage our children, we might do spelling tests at home, we might help with homework. The effort's there, you know, but the problem often isn't effort, it's direction. So imagine setting off to, I don't know, Scotland without a sat-nav. You'd still be driving, you'd still be using fuel, you'd still be driving and trying really hard, but there's a good chance that you'd make some wrong turns because you haven't organised it properly. The Birmingham 11 Plus is exactly the same, because a child following the right plan will often make faster progress than a child simply doing more work. Preparation isn't about doing everything, it's about doing the right thing or the right things in the right order. So I'm just going to sum this up and tell you something that I've noticed. After years of working with families, I've realised something really important. The children that succeed aren't always the children who started with the highest ability. They're usually the children whose families understood the journey. They knew what to focus on. They knew what to worry about. They knew when to introduce new topics. They knew when to revisit older topics. And most importantly, you know, they weren't guessing. They weren't just trying lots of different things. They had a clear roadmap. And that word roadmap is probably one of the most important words you'll hear today, because without one, the Birmingham 11 Plus can feel really, really overwhelming. And with one, things start to make sense. It's basically like you've got someone holding your hand, showing you what's taking place, when it's taking place, key dates to remember, everything that you need to have a clear journey that you and your child understand right from the beginning all the way to the end. So right now you're probably thinking, what actually helps children pass then? Because we've talked about the mistakes, but let's flip the question around a little bit. What actually works? If you could sit down with every child who successfully gained a grammar school place, you'd probably notice something. Yes, they worked hard. Yes, they were bright, but they also had structure. They weren't waking up every Saturday morning to wonder or figure out what to revise. Their parents weren't buying another version of a book every new month and hoping it would be sort of the magic answer. They followed a clear plan. And that's exactly what I believe children need. Not more pressure, more clarity. Because over the years, we've developed a very simple approach at Splat Tuition. Everything we do follows 3 stages. We call it strengthen, accelerate, excel. Those 3 words shape everything we teach, not because they sound catchy, but because that's genuinely how children learn best. Step 1, strengthen. everything begins here. Now, I know this might sound surprising, but this is where many families accidentally skip ahead. Parents are keen to get started. Children are super, super excited. So they dive straight in to practice papers. But imagine building a house, let's say. Would you start with the roof? Of course not. You'd start by building the foundations first. Exactly the same applies here. So before we ask children to answer difficult questions under timed conditions, we first need to make sure the foundations are secure. Do they really understand fractions? Can they confidently solve multi-step maths problems? Is their vocabulary strong enough to understand more complex tasks? Can they explain their thinking? Do they genuinely understand what a question is before they try to answer it? Because here's the truth. Many children, they don't struggle because they are incapable. They struggle because there's a tiny gap in their understanding that nobody has spotted yet. And here's the really encouraging part. When you find those gaps and teach them properly, progress often happens much faster than parents expect. And it's a lovely thing to see. I've seen children who thought they weren't good at maths, they suddenly light up because someone finally explained something in a way that made sense to them. I've seen children who dreaded reading begin to enjoy it because their vocabulary grew and texts stopped feeling overwhelming. And that's why we always strengthen first, because stronger foundations make everything easier. Step 2, accelerate. Once the foundations are secure, and only after the foundations are secure, we can move forward. And this is where children begin to stretch themselves. The questions become more challenging. Their thinking becomes deeper. Their problem solving becomes much sharper. They're no longer simply learning school maths. They're learning how to think like the 11 plus expects them to think. And the same with English. We're not simply helping children to read, we're helping them to interpret, infer, analyse. We're helping them to also recognise patterns and, build vocabulary. And the same with verbal reasoning as well. Because children stopped seeing random question types. They began recognising patterns. The same with non-verbal reasoning. The strange looking shapes, they simply begin to make sense. And the exam starts to feel familiar, not frightening. And that's a massive shift because children perform far better when the paper feels familiar. Step 3, excel. Now we prepare for the real thing, because knowing something and performing under pressure are two completely different skills. So think about professional athletes. They don't train by simply reading about their sport. They recreate match conditions again and again and again. They continue to do this until they get it, and they know that they get it, because they want competition day to feel familiar. And that's exactly what we do. Children begin working under timed conditions. They learn when to move on from difficult questions. They learn not to panic if they know an answer immediately. If they don't know an answer immediately. They learn how to manage their energy across the whole assessment. They begin truly trusting themselves. And when you can see that confidence in children, it's delightful because you know that they've got it. And it's such an important moment, because confidence, it doesn't appear overnight. Confidence grows every time a child thinks, I've done this before. And that's the type of confidence we want. Not false confidence, but real, true confidence. The kind that's built through preparation. And, here's something that I truly believe, and I've believed for a long time. Children don't rise to the level of their hopes. They rise to the level of their preparation. And that's why our focus has never been, let's just get through another worksheet. Our focus is to prepare children properly in the real way, with structure and clarity. And there's a massive difference. And that's why we keep our groups super small. Parents often ask me, why only 4 children? It's a fair question. The honest answer is, because children deserve to be noticed. Imagine a classroom with 30 children, it's overwhelming. Children get left behind or left in front. Think back to your own school days. There were always children who happily put their hand up, and then there were quieter children, the ones who understood less than everyone realised, the ones who smiled and kind of like nodded, the ones who hoped nobody would answer them a question at all. In a large group, those children can disappear. In smaller groups, they can't. We see them all. We notice when someone hesitates. We notice when someone gets, let's say, their fractions wrong. We notice when vocabulary is holding someone back. We notice when confidence drops. And, because we notice, we can actually do something about it immediately. Every child is seen. Every child contributes. Every child matters. And it's just not possible when you're teaching 20 or 30 children at once, because quality has always been more important than quantity, and it always will be. But, we don't just support children, and this is the beautiful thing about our programme. We support parents too. I'm going to let you into a little bit of a secret. Now, sometimes the parents need just as much reassurance as the children, and that's completely understandable, because the Birmingham 11 Plus isn't just another school test. It's an entirely new journey. There are deadlines, there are school choices, there are registration dates and exam arrangements. There's conflicting advice that you will hear from different people. There's Facebook opinions and family opinions and well-meaning neighbours who all seem to know someone whose cousin got into grammar school. It can be and will be overwhelming, but my job isn't simply to teach your child and support your child. It's to remove as much uncertainty from your family's journey as possible, because something wonderful happens when parents feel calmer. Children usually do too. Children pick up on your emotions. So if as parents we're anxious, they become anxious too, even if they try to hide it. If we organise, they feel organised too. If we trust the process, they'll trust the process too. That's why we guide families, not just children. Is this programme the right fit for every single child? The answer is absolutely not. And I think that's really important. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for commitment. We are looking to give clarity. Children still need to attend. They still need to practice. You as a parent, you will still need to encourage, because progress still requires consistency. And honest truth, there isn't a magic shortcut. There isn't, a wand or a secret book. There isn't a miracle tutor. Success comes from lots of small things done consistently over time. So if that sounds like the type of journey that your family is willing to commit to, then I genuinely believe that we can help. So let me just finish with this. Now, right at the start of the presentation, I asked you to imagine your child opening that email. Now, whether that email eventually contains a grammar school offer or whether your child goes on to thrive in another fantastic school, my hope is exactly the same, that from years from now, you never have to sit there wondering, what if we started earlier? What if we asked for help? What if we had a clear plan like that lady says? Instead, I want you to look back and think, we gave our children every opportunity, because that's all any parent can do. Parents, we can't guarantee success. We can't remove obstacles. We can't promise every dream, but we can give children every opportunity to succeed. And, that's what great parenting looks like, giving your children opportunities. So your next step, if today's presentation has given you clarity, if you've been sitting there thinking, this is exactly what we've been looking for, then I'd love to invite you to take the next step with us together. Now, the next step, it isn't enrolling. The next step is simply applying. We'll learn a little bit more about your child and where they are now, and where you'd like them to be, and whether our 11 Plus Academy is indeed the right fit. And if we genuinely believe that we can help, we'll explain exactly what the journey looks like. And if we don't think that we're the best fit, we're going to be very open and honest with you, and I will tell you, we're not the best fit, because I'd rather earn your trust than simply gain another enrolment. It's going to be a journey that we're all going to go on to support our children and to support your children. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I genuinely hope you leave today feeling clearer, calmer and more confident than when you started. And remember, every child can. They just need someone who believes in them, and who has the clarity to show you what to do, how to do it, and to begin that process. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you and more about your child, and we'll go from there. I'm Cordelia Cooper. Thank you for spending this time with me. All the best.